Would you like to save money in the maintenance of your aircraft? I know we all want to save money in the maintenance of our aircraft because it's a big ticket item. And today I'd like to talk about common problems, things that just make your maintenance bill go up or give your A&P mechanic grief. Today, I've got Kenneth Hale, the Director of Maintenance for Casey Aviation Services, here with me. Kenneth, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, it's been good. This is 2 in a row, so I'm pretty excited. I really want people to understand maintenance. I want them to understand what makes your life better, which is what makes their life better, and what produces a good airplane that they can actually go flying. So let's talk about the landscape of what's going on in the maintenance world today. First thing, how hard is it to find a mechanic today? A good, qualified, ready to go mechanic that you can turn loose into the maintenance shop and make it work, and do good work.
I'll say it's like finding a needle in a haystack. I mean, the airlines do a pretty good job at snatching up most of the qualified individuals if you look at it from a licensing perspective. I mean, there are good employees and good mechanics to be had out there, but you've really got to go hunt for them.
Or you got to birth them.
Or you have to, make your own.
And is that that's a tried and true way to do it in the maintenance world, isn't it?
That's correct, because you basically get to indoctrinate that employee. It's a new job. It is a new experience. They have no prior experience working on what you work on with your procedures. So you kind of get to mold that person into the facility. I mean, they learn how to function. They learn how to use your paperwork, your documentation system. So they are probably going to be the most compliant and repetitive person in the room whenever it comes to company procedures. So,
but there's a training period.
Correct. There's an investment period, if you will, where you have a 2.5 year build up to get them to where they have their license and they can function on their own as a mechanic.
And right now we are hiring. Meaning if you're out there and listening to this and you know somebody that's a good mechanic that you think would be a good fit with us, and what I call a thoroughbred, no donkeys. We don't want people that are crazies or anything like that. We don't want any no donkeys in the room. We want nothing but thoroughbreds. But we don't mind taking somebody that is a good character, mechanically apt, all those kind of different things, and create them into something that we found success doing, being able to do this. And that's one of, matter of fact, if you look at the FAA, you've got to have a certain amount of time under an A&P mechanic doing that work. Then you got to take written tests. Then you got to take a practical test to get your A&P. And it's a time, that idea of the master and the apprentice is a time-honored, wonderful way of doing it, where you get to create that mechanic that you want.
Yeah, and if you will, it really breeds subject matter experts, because what you work on in the hangar is what they know. From the minute they start to the minute they get their license, and as they continue, they become subject matter experts on the airplane in the hangar. So we work on almost exclusively PA46s, so by the time our guys go to take their license tests, and they will be a subject matter expert on a PA46 because they will have done every job there is to do on one, which means that the goal is where every employee in the hangar is a subject matter expert, as good as myself or anybody else standing next to them. Anybody in that hangar should be able to do any job and do it well and efficiently.
Today we are a PA46 centric shop, meaning that we work on PA46s. There might be another airplane here and there that we do something for, whether they're a local or a friend or something of this nature. We'll help, or somebody that had trouble on the airport. They landed here and had we've got a Cessna 182 or something.
Correct.
That's here, and they had an engine trouble, and we're going to work on the airplane because they're in a jam.
It's never fun to be stranded at an airport away from home.
Right. But we are a PA46 centric shop because we believe that the best shops that are out there in the world are the ones that do one type of airframe. We want to be a PA46 shop because there may be 15 airplanes in the hangar. They're all PA46s, and you know what good looks like as you can look on this other, the 3 other airplanes did it this way. That's probably the right way.
Exactly. It's one of my favorite teaching examples is you have the show child up front that is almost perfect. We get those every once in a while. And you've got the aircraft in the back that hasn't been brought up to compliance in quite some time. So it's fun to be able to take someone with less experience and show them the polar opposites of the maintenance spectrum. An aircraft that has been pretty neglected and has not been well cared for, and then on the opposite side, one that is primo, had everything done on time and is just clean and immaculate. So it makes for a really good training environment for these guys to see what right is and what wrong is. I mean, it really ingrains it in those employees.
Absolutely. Let's talk about how involved, like most of the people that are going to listen to this podcast are going to be owner operators. Okay, they're a pilot, they own the airplane. How involved do you want them?
I want them to be pretty involved. I like to think of one of the responsibilities of our mechanics and myself as pilot educators. I don't think a lot of pilots understand the aircraft as well as they want to. There's always something more to learn, and that's always the case, because if you're not learning, you're stagnant, and that's just not a good place to be. You should always be trying to go out and learn something new. Maintenance is one of those areas that I think pilots should be involved in, because that's how you reduce your operating costs. You know what's necessary and what's not. You know if somebody's trying to take advantage of you, because you yourself become a subject matter expert on your airplane, so you know what's necessary and what's not.
Right. Okay, so if somebody comes to you and says, I want you to do an oil change, do you want them in the shop with you?
It's perfectly fine if they are. I have no objections to that.
Yeah. Give me a pet peeve of a maintenance owner, of the owner of a maintenance shop. Give me something that man, if the owner just does this,
the biggest challenge I would say, or pet peeve, I don't know that I'd call it pet peeve, because there's just some things you have to deal with in the industry, but it's work scope changes. You know, you have a projected work scope whenever you start the inspection process or the maintenance process, whichever it is. The customer brings the aircraft to you. And then, say 4 or 5 days in through your 2-week window, somebody says, well, hey, I'd really like to add these items. And then now you have a work scope creep is what we call it. So now your work scope has grown, and then it grows some more, and then it grows some more. And instead of a 2-week window, now you're in a 6-week window, which throws off your entire forecasted plan for the next month, because now you have an airplane there that's not supposed to be there.
Right.
So it can, work scope creep can really hamstring us as a maintenance facility, especially if it's not discussed or planned prior to that maintenance visit.
Somebody comes and hands you an airplane for an annual inspection. You squawk the airplane out, produce a list of airworthy items, recommended items, and just noteworthy items. You present that to the owner of the airplane. What do you expect?
Well, I expect normally there's some method of communication, some fact checking, if you will, because some things are less commonly seen, so they'll get a second opinion, which is normal. I mean, I totally expect that, because it's no different than if you take your car to a dealership and they say you need an engine. Well, don't want to just let that be the be-all, end-all.
Right.
You kind of want a second opinion. So that's normal, but I do expect that process to move pretty quick. Whenever customers try to shop for their own parts, that does cause some issues. I won't say we go out trying to make a bunch of money off of part sales, because it's not really, I won't say that's a good way to do it, because it's already expensive enough to buy the parts as it is. The parts are already ungodly expensive. I mean, a windshield that's $28,000 is just painful, or
Right.
more than that now. So, you know, whenever the customer goes out and tries to shop for their own parts, it really complicates things, because now I don't have visibility on expected delivery dates or core return process or contact, or even whenever it comes down to it, is their part even acceptable for installation? Is it an acceptable core? And a lot of that comes back on you, even though you didn't buy those parts. The customer can get frustrated that, well, you told me those parts would fit. Well, I didn't go out and shop the part.
And if you get the wrong part, now you're dealing with that, and it messes up your timeline.
And everything can mess up the timeline, and that can be a frustration. You're not only hampering your own schedule, you're hampering everybody else's schedule too, because you have X amount of planned labor, X amount of planned square footage, and anytime you have a project extension, it hurts everybody.
You know, one of the expense items that I knew was going to be there, but I didn't really understand it was going to be there from owning a maintenance shop, is just having parts in the bin, having it available. The more parts you can have, the better. Meaning and we invest in parts is one of the things that we do, and that was one of the capital expenditures that I was like, wow, I can't believe.
Yeah, tooling and parts eat up a maintenance shop startup budget extremely quick, especially whenever you're talking about rotables, main gear actuators or nose gear actuators, hydraulic system components, engine components, magnetos, turbochargers, exhaust systems. Those are all, mega dollar, especially if you want to own it outright to shelf it, because you have to pay a core charge if you're not going to give them one back. So either at some point you have to come up with a core to buy to fix yourself to shelf, or you have to buy it outright and just pay the core charge.
Yeah, we pretty much we hired a guy, Russell, kind of a cool guy. We'll probably put him on the podcast one day. But Russell, all Russell does is find parts for us.
Right,
and he's a part finder. He does other things. He does some of the administrative type stuff. But my point is the acquisition of parts. We've got full-time people that do that, and you're probably not going to do better than we are as far as finding the parts.
No, and we do hunt for the best deal for parts that we can. We use a couple of different pieces of software and several different vendors to make sure that we are getting the best price and the best quality parts that we can, because it's already expensive enough to own a PA46. My job is to give the owner operator the safest aircraft that they can get at a price that is as low as they can get.
Yep.
And maintaining that quality at the lower operating cost.
Okay, so let's talk about what are you seeing as prevalent, everyday, or very frequent problems that show up? What parts aren't showing up? What parts are breaking? Tell me the things that are happening in your shop that are just where you're like, yep, we see that all the time. Yeah.
So the number one part that's got a terrible reliability is the emergency extension valve. Especially completely. 2001 after, whenever we moved to Triumph. I mean, the emergency extension valves are just horribly unreliable.
Let me just tell you, as a flight instructor, I believe that one of the important things that I teach is the emergency gear extension. In other words, if you fly with us, we're going to go up and do an emergency gear extension. We know how to do it. We're very good at it. And I want a pilot to be able to see that and understand how far do you have to pull that red handle out, because it's different and different. If you have Parker Hannifin or Garkinian or whatever, and you pull that, the length that you're pulling is different. We've even had people that pulled and didn't pull hard enough, thought the gear might have gone down, but didn't. And so you need to feel that. I will tell you, I have stopped doing it for a 2021 and after. So if you buy almost all M600s, if you buy one of those, I'm not doing it, because I have pulled that handle out, extended the gear, and now you can't get it back in, and there's nothing you can do except replace the part.
Correct. Yeah, and that stemmed. So we went from Garkinian to Parker, Triumph to Frisbee, and now we're all the way back at Garkinian again. So Garkinian is who is making the current hydraulic system components for the 21 and up. I believe it's 21 and up. The other thing is, if you have a hydraulic component failure in your Triumph or Frisbee airplane, you get Garkinian replacement parts for those as well. So if you ever do have a failure, which the Triumph and Frisbee units do fail as well, they just don't have near the failure rate the new Garkinian parts do.
Right. I agree completely. For instructors out there, this is a real thing, because you can pull the gear extension, you can't reset the system, and your training's over. And now and matter of fact, that airplane's not leaving unless that airplane wants to fly away stiff-legged.
Which even then there's still a risk, because your gear is mechanically locked down with locking pawls. But the normal mode is the hydraulic pressure is what holds the gear down. The locking balls are a backup. So it's still a pretty good risk.
It's a questionable thing that your placement you're at. It's not ideal. Getting the system fixed is the right thing, but I've had so many M600s where I pulled the emergency gear extension and the stupid valve broke. This is a safety thing in my opinion. Piper, if you're listening to this, you've got to get your quality or your parts up, and when it's related to that emergency extension valve, because this is a real thing. Instructors are ceasing doing the training because we don't have the right part. Mechanics are having to wait to get the part in. It's just a big mess. This is one of them that's out there.
It's human factors 101. There's a problem. It has a cause. It's understood. It's known, and now we are basically changing the way that we're training, which is a safety issue, if you will, because you can't do the training to educate the pilot how the system works.
That's right.
Because the parts reliability is so poor that nobody wants to pull the handle to write a $2,700 check each time.
That's right.
And
be inconvenienced.
Exactly. And that's human factors 101. We've got a problem and we're avoiding it, and we can't get a solution. I mean, I've submit multiple SDRs. I know Malibu Aerospace has submit multiple SDRs. You can look up the SDR for the
service difficulty report.
Yeah, service difficulty reports through the online system. And if you look up a PA46 350P or 500 TP or the 600 TP, and you look at the service difficulty report listing, there are tons of emergency extension of valves, several on the same airplane. I know on one of the local aircraft here, I changed 3 on the same airplane in the span of 14 months.
Wow. That tells you there's a problem right there.
And, they are rigged by the book. We've checked rigging, checked installation, made sure we're getting right parts, tried overhauled ones, tried new ones, and the parts just aren't reliable. I'm not sure if it's a design issue, a manufacturing issue. I'm not sure what the issue is, but, it has been a consistent issue.
Okay, so let's talk about another one I'm hearing about. Engines themselves, getting a factory reman or an overhaul of your Lycoming or Continental engine, or replacement cylinders.
Yeah, there has been some serious production backlogs from both Lycoming and Continental. Not only that, but the price of the parts has increased as well. I think that was 4 months ago. I priced a factory overhauled Lycoming, and it was eye-watering.
Yeah, 140, 150.
Yeah, 147,000 is what the sticker price was.
Yeah, when you talk about a new engine, 140.
And the lead time is anywhere from 12 to 18 months.
Right. So this is, literally, I just bought a new engine for my Continental engine for my Bonanza. We have a Bonanza. Yes, I know all y'all are going to hate me for flying a Bonanza around when I'm a PA46 guy, but that's what's happening right now. One day we're going to buy a Malibu or a Mirage or something, but today we fly Bonanza. But I just had to buy a new engine for this, and you better be on the front end of that, determining when you're going to need that engine. And you better plan it, pay for it, get the deposit, begin to get the process, because otherwise you're going to be sitting on the ground for a year.
Yeah, and it gets more expensive every year you wait too.
That's right.
It's the same thing with cylinders. If you've been watching your compressions or your oil consumption, depending on which engine you're operating, and if you're noticing a trend towards, my goodness, next year I'll probably need cylinders. Every year you wait, the cost goes up 2 to 3 to 5%, depending on who the manufacturer is. And the availability goes up and down. They only make so many per year per engine run, and they're allocated to certain distributors, and they get bought and they don't make any more. They're done. So if you come upon a maintenance interval where, hey, I need cylinders and I can't get them, you're stuck.
That's right. So that's another item. Tell me another part issue or maintenance issue that you see a lot in the fleet.
Another one, there's a distributor that's been going out buying up a lot of the little guys, and this has been limiting the availability of overhauled or new parts because, well, they've eliminated the competition. So there's no pricing variability. There's no competition. The market's stagnant because one manufacturer owns them all. And that goes from alternators to magnetos to other engine components as well. And, they haven't really fixed the manufacturing problem. They just killed all their competition, which means that now...
It means the prices go up because you got a supply and demand issue.
Correct.
And you got one guy or one company controlling the price, and they can pretty much do whatever they want. You got to buy it from them.
Exactly. So that's another situation that's been going on. It hasn't been talked about very much. It hasn't really been in the media. They've been pretty quietly doing that. And it has been hampering, especially the piston GA guys, because it's mainly piston parts.
Okay. Give me another one. We talked about windshields on the last podcast. We probably don't need to go in depth, but I'm telling you right now, you're not going to find a windshield, are you?
And that's most windows. Aviol is Piper's storehouse or stockhouse part supplier. That's their factory vendor, if you will, and they don't keep very many in stock to begin with. So if you're one of the 2 or 3 lucky people that have to buy a window, if you're the 4th guy, you're in trouble because there won't be any. And their process for replacement of those parts is slow.
Yeah, agreed. So windshields. Tell me a problem that you are seeing in the PA46 fleet as far as just things that break more than they should, or that a pilot should know about.
Super common one is the prop heat blade harnesses on the Hartzell 4-bladers on jet props and Meridians. It's really the aluminum blade 4-bladers, both the scimitar and the straight blades. They have a tendency to wear on the spinner and then short out. And on the Meridians, whenever they short out, they take out the prop heat timer too. That's a consistent one. They make it about 200 to 300 hours, and you'll be changing them as a set again. And most of the time, what that comes down to is there's a specific way to tie wrap the harnesses to the counterweights on the blades, and that's not being done. And that allows the prop heat harnesses to walk away from the counterweight, stick out of the spinner, and it just wears on the spinner bulkhead.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's
and it's a pretty easy one to catch on pre-flight, because if you can see your spinner or your prop heat harnesses sticking out of the spinner, you're probably going to have a failure pretty quick.
Gotcha. Something to look out. Okay, so let's talk about more of that. If you own a PA46, what are some things that pilots can impact in terms of by flying differently, noticing earlier on pre-flights, things of this nature?
On pre-flight, I mean, most of the time, as long as you're keeping your struts clean.
There you go. That's a good one right there.
On a jet prop, sumping the header tank, those don't have a locking sump, and I really recommend people to sump that header tank. They do have a tendency to collect moisture. That's another good one. That gets rid of your erroneous header tank indications that you can get, especially with the capacitance probes.
Let's jump on that one for just a second. As instructors, we generally recommend people don't sump their own tanks in terms of just habitually doing it, especially at an outstation, because those jet fuel's kind of like WD-40, meaning it's a penetrant. It'll weasel through that little part, and if you don't get it seated back right, now you're just going to leak a bunch of fuel.
That's correct.
We have a thing with pilots where we say, if you ever show up at a maintenance facility for any reason whatsoever, just have a maintenance guy sump all your tanks while you're right there at your home base in a good place where you can do this. But you agree with this, correct?
I agree with that for the most part, except for the header tank and the firewall filter. I think those two, I don't think they get sumped as often as they should. I think they should get sumped a little bit more often, at least once a month. If you're about to go on a trip, and if you're on a field with maintenance. If you're not on a field with maintenance, I don't know. I might, only sump it where there is maintenance.
Yeah, because you can certainly have a problem where I get one phone call a month with a pilot with a thumb up in the sump well, and on the phone on the other one, saying, "Hey, how do I get this stupid thing to stop leaking?" And the answer is, "Well, we got to find maintenance."
Yeah.
And so you've got no. But the point that you're saying is something is important. And I'm saying that as well. I will tell you, in the jet world, you need to think about where you're going to be sumping. It's almost always that somebody calls me and they're at Podunk Little Airport and decided for whatever reason they're going to sump. Now, let's go back for a second because it just needs to be said just aloud and loud. If you're a piston guy, you need to be something. Period.
Every time.
That's right. That's right. Piston airplanes, water in a piston airplane is no bueno, is not right, and you need to be something that piston airplane. We're talking about the jet boys.
That's
We're talking about if you're flying a turbine around, the something is less important. It has migrated, if I understand what you're saying, to a place in the turbine world where pilots are never something, and that's creating a problem.
Correct. I've noticed a trend now where it's almost, you ask about when was the last time the tanks were sumped, and it's, last time it was at annual.
Yeah.
Well, that was 12 months ago.
So for a year, no one sumped the tanks. That's not what we're advocating.
Correct. So at least once a month, at least sump the header tank and the firewall filter to get the fuel, because that's the last stops before it goes to the engine. Those are the easiest sumps to operate that don't have a tendency to stick. The wing sumps, they can be a bear. They can lock open on you, and they will make a mess.
Yeah, let's go back to it because you talked about cleaning off the shafts on your landing gear.
Yeah,
basically.
and the struts and the actuators.
Keeping those clean. I have been told that you definitely want to keep them clean. Period. Case closed. You want to keep them clean. A bad way to clean it is with 100 low lead, because 100 low lead will take all the oil off of there too. But a great way to do it is brake fluid. You agree?
Yep. 5606, which is what the hydraulic and brake fluid is in the PA46, has this really cool quality where it can rejuvenate itself. So if you have old sticky fluid on your struts, if you take new hydraulic fluid, it will easily wipe off all the old stuff, but it leaves a protective film on the strut.
Yeah, and I've even seen pilots with an oily rag, basically with 5606 on it, put it into a plastic container, zip tie it, you're good to go. And then whenever you want to go clean them up, go out there and do it. But that's a great job, because if you don't do this, you're taking all that gunk and junk and everything from that strut, shoving it up in there as you land and taxi around, and you're going to get to repack your.
Yeah, the wiper seals really do not like that. That's what they're there for, but it definitely reduces their lifespan.
Okay. Give me another. Can you think of anything else where things that pilots can do that'll help reduce their maintenance bill?
Another one that I'm always going to harp on is oil changes. Consistent oil changes that are on time.
Piston engines.
On piston engines. Well, even turbine engines, because turbine engines have oil change intervals as well. Yeah. But being on time with those is dollar for dollar the cheapest thing you can do as an owner-operator. Even if you're doing it a little bit early, I always recommend my clients, especially in the PA46, 30-hour oil change intervals.
Okay. I was going to ask you, is 30 hours is what you recommend?
30 hours is what I recommend. And the reason being, 30 hours is a solid target to try and hit with how these engines are operated, with the temperatures that they're exposed to, and the power settings, because they get flown at pretty high power settings a lot, which is, it uses the oil life up, because the hotter you get the oil, the shorter your oil change life is going to be. The other reason is, we're humans. We forget things and we miss things, and you'll probably overfly that 30 hours before you even know you got there. So you set that oil change interval a little early, probably 5 to 10 hours. And then if you forget about it, you're still within the normal acceptable range of an oil change.
I've got some clients that run around at 50 hours, and I think if you arguably that 50, I think 50 is too long, and here's the reason why. On a piston PA46, there's so many moving parts up there in that engine that when you do an oil change, it just gives a mechanic a chance to look around.
Correct.
Will they go 50? Maybe, if under the right circumstances and the right scenario, if you have long flights and things of this now. Okay, I kind of see where you'd migrate up a little bit. But still, there's so many moving parts up inside there. It just gives a mechanic a chance to get a flashlight and a mirror and look around. Because an oil change is not just an oil change. An oil change is an opportunity for a mechanic to root around.
Correct. Yeah, we have found lots of issues at oil changes that could have been major problems if they had gone a little bit further, but were prevented because we were already in there doing something else, especially exhaust systems. Exhaust systems are the most common defect to find when you're doing an oil change, because you'll never know unless you pull the cowling off, and that's the most common reason to pull a cowling off.
And we have crashed PA46s due to exhaust failures. And again, if you got an exhaust leak under the cowl, you got a blowtorch going off under your cowl. It's literally the hot gases. Look at your TIT reading, which is going to be near 1600 degrees most of the time. That is a blowtorch.
It's
And
plasma.
That's it. That air is coming out. It is super hot, and it will light things on fire. We have literally had airplanes that have crashed and because of exhaust leaks. So just having somebody look under your cowl for an exhaust leak during an oil change, there's wisdom in that.
Yeah, and you definitely want a mechanic doing your oil changes that is not just going through the motions, just throwing a filter on it, throwing oil in it, and kicking it out the door. You want somebody that understands, to look at the installation and pick up on the issues. Again, you're kind of being a detective a little bit. I see a little bit of gray streaking there. I should probably figure out what that is and see if it's an actual issue or not. You want somebody that has that attitude when they approach an oil change. It's not just going through the motions, but actually doing the work.
Okay, so let's talk about, there's some items under the hood that have manufacturer recommended TBOs. And some of them are important, some of them not. I'm just going to rattle off a couple of them, and you tell me yay or nay. Starter generator on a turbine at 1,000 hours.
That's going to be a required.
Yep. And not only required, I would say do it just because that is your starter. It is also your generator, and it is the key to a cool start. There's a long list of reasons. I mean, and not only that, I mean, if you run one out past 1,000 hours, the odds of you having a BER overhaul of your starter generator exponentially go up every 100 hours you go past. That's right.
We have pulled them off at 12 and 1,300 hours before and received scrap units.
Right.
And had BER cores at $10,000 and $12,000 before.
There you go.
So instead of having a $3,500 overhaul because we did it on time, we had a $9,000 BER starter generator.
There you go. What's BER?
Beyond economical repair. In other words, buy a new one.
Yep. Buy a new one straight up with no core.
Correct.
That's exactly right. Every 400 hours with a turbine pilot, you're going to have your nozzles flushed and flow checked.
Correct. That's required by the engine manufacturer.
Would you do a bore scope at that time?
Required.
Required. There you go.
There's no ifs, ands, or buts. If you're having a mechanic doing fuel nozzles and not getting a bore scope report each time, you need to ask them why. Because it is a requirement to do a hot section bore scope whenever you do fuel nozzles.
Vacuum filters.
Required.
Okay, good. So
the central vac filters in the PA46, the piston variants, have a 12-month life limit by the manufacturer, which is a requirement. Actually, on several airplanes, there's ADs on that.
I have a client that about, 8-9 years ago came to me. We were talking about tires, and he said, Joe, I change out all my tires at every annual. And I said, well, why? And he said, I never have to worry about tires, which I thought was brilliant. That the idea, if you're flying 150 hours a year, and when you're doing your annual, the airplane's going to be up on jacks and you're going to swing the gear. His thought process was tires are something you never want to question in a PA46. And I agree completely with him on the tires are so stinking important. But he basically said, just change out all the tires every year. That's cheaper. It's already up in the air. And therefore you don't have to worry about anything. Agreed?
I don't think so. Anytime you do repeat work, you introduce risk of mistake.
So if a tire's got life on it, you're good.
As long as that installation is correct and the tire is functioning correct and it's not leaking, I'm going to leave it alone. The number one killer of tires on a PA46 is low tire pressure. People don't check the tires, and it takes that tube and it rolls it up inside the tire and it rips the valve stem off. Right. 9 times out of 10, that's your tire failure.
There you go. And are you using nitrogen or oxygen for your tires?
Nitrogen.
There you go. 100%? Did we just use nitrogen everywhere?
Pure nitrogen.
Pure nitrogen. Okay. We've talked about prop overhaul in the last one. We talked about hot section inspection. Let me think of some oil changes. Are you changing the filter every time?
Every time.
No question about it.
No questions asked. It's a cheap part. You're already there. It's cheap insurance.
Tell me another cheap insurance part on the airplane that you're just doing just because.
I mean, that's standard filters, oil changes, any kind of preventative maintenance part, lubrication of the aircraft. I mean, which owners can do. I mean, you can, if have your mechanic print you out the lubrication chart, and if you know you're going to fly more than 100 hours in a year and you're not going to visit maintenance, lubricate your airframe, lubricate your flight controls, lubricate the pivot points on the gear, because you're still using those. They're supposed to be lubricated frequently, but it's an easy item for the owner to take care of.
If somebody flies 300 hours a year in their piston PA46, do you want to see that airplane more or less?
Probably more. At least you'd really want to keep the 100-hour inspection schedule, because you'd want to be doing oil changes every 30 to 50 and clean gap and rotate every 100, along with airframe lubrication and care.
Okay, turbochargers. There's not a TBO on that.
There's not, but there's kind of a industry accepted lifespan of anywhere between 9 and 1,200 hours.
So about 1,000. When you hit midlife on that thing, just pull them off and put new ones on, or get them overhauled.
You send them out and you get them overhauled. The earlier you catch problems, the cheaper that overhaul is, and you'll notice that's a pretty common theme in maintenance. If you have a good maintenance staff and you know the common issues and you kind of know about what those time limits are where things start getting really expensive to fix, it can save you money in the long term, because instead of waiting for it to break and having a turbocharger that's scrapped, that's, $15,000 new,
right,
you're paying $6,000 to get it overhauled.
Right. Talk about magnetos.
Magnetos are a common pain point, especially on Mirages. They do require 500-hour inspections religiously. No ifs, ands, or buts.
So when it comes, do it, even if you're not forced to.
Correct, because they do pretty habitually fail right outside of that 500-hour window. Normally, that's due to moisture, due to the way the magneto pressurization is set up.
Your favorite PA46 to work on?
Probably an 85 or an 86 Malibu.
Okay, so you like the Continentals.
I like the Continentals. They're smooth. They make really smooth. It's just a different feeling in the airframe. A Mirage feels like it's trying to make the horsepower, and a Continental is just making the horsepower.
Yeah. Piper, if you're listening to this one, this is kind of a little off the subject, but it's not, because you just said that. Piper owns the type certificate for that. They could pull the Continental back on they could put it back on. They could call it, instead of an M350, call it an M310. That'd be beautiful. It'd be one of those fantastic things ever. And offer that Continental engine. I'm telling you, Piper, if you did this, you would sell a lot of PA46. There's a whole bunch of efficiency-minded people that if you did do that, it'd be fantastic.
I think so. If you were to take the Mirage airframe we have now and pair it with the 550C that we have STC'd already, but derated at 310 horsepower, and step that back up to where it's actually rated at, I think we would have a machine.
I'm telling you, Piper, you'd sell a whole bunch of these things. I mean, it'd just be fantastic. It'd be fantastic.
You get the power and the fuel economy at the same time. Because right now you kind of have to pick. Do you want the horsepower of the Mirage, or do you want the fuel economy of the Malibu?
That's right. Yeah, it'd be a fantastic airplane. Kenneth Hale, I appreciate you answering questions about maintenance and what all happens in the maintenance world. Kenneth can be reached via email or phone. Just go to the Casey Aviation Services tab. His phone number, his contact will be there. Give him a ring if you ever have any maintenance needs and or maintenance questions. That's for sure. I hope this podcast has helped you as you consider your maintenance, and I hope it's given you a tidbit of information. Maybe give you an idea of how you can fly your PA46 better and cheaper. Maintenance is super critical. Joe, Casey, and
Kenneth Hale
signing out.